Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very delighted to be here today with Johan Vanderplaetse of Schneider Electric, and this is an informal conversation between Johan and myself. We plan about 30 minutes plus of discussion and conversation about the Russian market and business. There might be some comments about the CIS as well. So very nice to see you again, Johan. I've had the pleasure of listening to you recently, and I actually think I saw on LinkedIn this morning that Schneider Electric have published results, business results. So I'm pleased to see that, and I'll let you comment on that. But first of all, I've had the pleasure of knowing you for decades, but could you give a very short summary of your background and then how you ended up in Russia and what you've been doing in Russia?
Yeah, of course, Danny, yes, decades, it's scary, isn't it? But my background is very much tied with this part of the world, if you like, though I'm not born in Russia. I'm Belgian, but I graduated from law school back in '92, which was when the whole Soviet Union had just collapsed. And as a young professional, I thought, okay, interesting, the largest country next to Europe is a country which we really do not understand. So there should be opportunities with opening up the country for Western professionals. I packed my bags. I moved to Moscow back in 1992 to live a full year together with a Russian family, rented a room there, tried to learn the Russian language, and then I started my career. As I said, always connected to this part of the world. For many years, I was in charge of the activities of Alcatel, a telecommunication company, which is now part of Nokia, managing their activities in Russia, CIS, also Central Eastern Europe. Thereafter, I moved to an American multinational, Emerson. Also there was in charge of their operations in this part of the world. And now since a bit over 5 years, I'm working for a French multinational with French roots, Schneider Electric, specialist in energy management and automation. And also there I am providing leadership for Schneider Electric in Russia and CIS.
Super, thanks very much, Johan. We both then have shared decades of interest on Russia. Mm-hmm. My career, like yours, is totally dedicated to Russia and the region, Central Europe and so on. So between us, I think we've got 5 or 6 decades of accumulated experience, but we won't go too long into that. A couple of things I want to talk about, and I think I'll do it in this order. You know, we know about the image of Russia, and I'd like to come back to that later. But first of all, pretty straightforwardly, 2020 was the year of COVID in the world and in the Russian market. What's your business experience and what have the results been of Schneider Electric, you know, pre-COVID, COVID, and what are your thoughts, first of all, short term, and then I'll come back and ask for longer term later.
Yeah, 2020 was a year that none of us will ever forget as long as we live, and let's hope it's still for a very long time that we will live. 2020, the year of the COVID disruption, a global disruption that impacted the business of Schneider Electric everywhere in the world. In the case of Russia, yes, indeed, there was the COVID disruption, but I like to say in the case of Russia, we did not have in 2021 crisis. We had to cope with 4 crises at the same time. There was, of course, the COVID crisis. But then on top of that, very sharp in Q2 2020, there was the collapse in the price of oil. So there was the oil crisis. And for a country which is still so dependent on export of hydrocarbons, that was a big thing. The third crisis, in a way interrelated to the second one, was the ruble crisis. We saw a devaluation of the ruble by close to 30%. And then the fourth one, which is unfortunately already a bit of an ongoing crisis since a couple of years, is the geopolitical crisis, the regime of sanctions, contra-sanctions. So globally, Schneider, we had 1 major disruption. Russia, we had 4 disruptions at the same time. But how did we end the year? As you said at the very beginning, actually yesterday we announced the global results. The global results for the company were actually very good. 25 billion euro sales, improvement of EBITDA, a record high free cash flow for the group. The share price of Schneider Electric at a historic high, with a market capitalization of around 70 billion euro. So it has been a good year, remarkably, for Schneider 2020. Why is that? Because the crisis is an opportunity. We know that. One of the things that happened was, of course, immediately large focus or acceleration of digitization, digital technologies, how to communicate with your end partners, but also how to help your end partners to automate their activities. And that is a thing on which we had already invested a lot in the past. We saw an acceleration in that respect, which was, of course, a good thing. And we continue to invest as well further in software positions. And then, of course, there was another trend that did not go away, and that also accelerated in 2020, which was everything which had to do with sustainability, the energy transition, the move away from hydrocarbons into renewable energy sources, wind, solar, electrification, again, digitization, which is a core activity of the group. So globally, we did actually very well. Back to Russia, we also were personally very pleased to see that in the global Schneider announcement, particularly Russia-CIS was pointed out as a region where in 2020 actually we saw double-digit growth. Even more than that, when we defended our budget at the beginning of 2020, before we even knew that there was a thing that COVID existed, we ended the year with results which were above the initial budget that we had accepted at the beginning of the year. So also there we have seen that because of then the sustainability agenda, the digitization agenda, but added on with the very important local manufacturing footprint that we have in this part of the world, which becomes even more important because of the geopolitical dynamics. Russia was a very good year, 2020 as well for the entire group. So we're feeling good. We're not feeling, arrogant or cocky. We know that we have excellent competitors as well, but we are feeling good in 2020, and we are very, very optimistic looking forward as well, both as a group and in Russia too, be it that we have some particular challenges here that we are all aware of.
Wow. Well, hearty congratulations. And as you know from our events and what the reports I'm producing, talking with people just yesterday as well, your results do exceed. You're very much in the higher grouping of companies' results. Pleasantly, though, for Central Europe and for Russia, the survey results that we're getting and the conversations we're having in January, yesterday, two companies said, surprisingly, we did very well in 2020. Yeah. And that was an industrial company on pumps, and that was an food ingredients company. So certainly for many companies, 2020 in Russia turned out not as tragically as could have been expected. Many companies, Johan, have said, unlike you surpassed them. Companies have said, we grew in 2020, but we did not make budget for the original budget, which is understandable. So I think that makes your achievement even more commendable. I've heard you talk, and I wouldn't dream of calling you a conglomerate, but you work in diversified fields. And, I've heard you talk, and I think that's part of the reason of the success, many others. But which sectors are driving things? What makes you feel good at the moment? You've talked about digitalization, but I'm thinking, industrial, automotive, retail, consumer, construction. What's going on?
Sure. Let me also pick up, I'm also chairing the Association of European Business, and most of the member companies of our association also recorded that 2020 was for them a good year, and in most of the cases a better year than in other parts of the world. But obviously it depends on the segment in which you are operating. If you're in the hotel sector, or if you're an SME for that matter, or if you're in the transportation, aviation sector, of course, 2020 was a more challenging year. For Schneider Electric, yes, indeed, we are not a conglomerate, but we do have a very wide variety of offering. We also have different ways to go to the market. And yes, the total results were very, very good. But then within the different businesses that we have, we have seen variances. A business unit, for instance, which did particularly well, much better than we forecasted, was what we call the home and distribution or retail segment, which is more the electrical gear you need in your apartment, the plugs, the little circuit breakers, all that technology. It has done very, very well. Why is that? Yes, indeed, people were in lockdown. They were not able to travel abroad. So many Russians decided, okay, it's a good opportunity to renovate my apartment or to renovate or dacha. So there was a increase in demand for that kind of technology. So that was very, very good. Another unit that did very well was everything which had to do with, as I mentioned, industrial automation, remote asset control, predictive maintenance, everything which is allowing assets to be remotely controlled, operated, reducing as well the OPEX, optimizing the CAPEX. That was another thing which did very well. Some segments did much less well. Also, some market segments did less well. Obviously, we see a lot of challenges, for instance, in the commercial building segments. We work remotely. We know that we will continue to work remotely as even COVID is going away. Many companies announced that in the future they will work in a hybrid model, 3 working days a week in the office, 2 days from home. But that means that the demand at the same time for office space in a building is going to go down. And already we see that quite some companies are trying to sublease office floors. What does it mean then in reality? We think that there will be less new construction in the short term or even medium term of commercial buildings. But as we like to say, every challenge is also an opportunity. Yes, indeed, we are providing those kind of plugs, but buildings are more and more automated as well. So if you talk about the new way of working, whereby less office space will be available, a worker will have the possibility to an application on his iPhone to book in advance a working station in the office or book in advance a meeting room. And that is then the other side. This is then the automation equipment that we are delivering to make buildings more clever, buildings more smart. So there as well we see opportunities as we move forward. And then again, Danny, as you know, everything which has to do with digitization, I think that is still going to be massive. Everybody realizes that this is not just a fashion grill or whatever. It is a thing that is here to stay.
Thanks a lot, Johan. And I just echo, of course, that comparison we both said over the years. And certainly in 2020 and for 2021, I'm hearing a lot of executives like yourself say, relatively, Russia is good. And I've always argued, I think, that on balance, compared with Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East, and parts of Asia, Russia is performing very well. Central Europe is also a nice cluster, as you well know. I've had the pleasure of hearing you say also that, Schneider Electric operation in Russia is relatively to your other operations, as you implied, good. And you once said, the various internal corporate KPIs in Russia performed relatively strongly. Obviously, one of those is HR, the Russian people, whom both of us admire. Talking about your own team, I imagine you might be enthusiastic, but HR within Schneider Electric, what you're seeing in the HR market and the dynamics of people and youth and talent, what are you seeing with the human resource base in Russia?
Yeah, well, as they say in the Russian language, "Kader решает все", all depends on your human resources. We are employing in Russia 8,000 people, so it's a very substantial base of employees that we have. But obviously also because of the fact that we are having 5 factories. So out of the 8,000, there are a lot of blue-collar workers, factory workers. Maybe first of all on that part, when we look at the efficiency of operation, the labor productivity, the cost of labor, if you are benchmarking or Russian factories versus, for instance, or Asian or Chinese factories, production in Russia is as efficient or even cheaper, if you like to use that word, than production that we have in many Asian countries. So Russia, production-wise, is a very good base, not only for the domestic market, but also for the export market, Central Asia, but also Eastern Central Europe. And that's a thing in which we are making progress ourselves as well. So that is on the blue collar, very competent and very attractive skilled labor force. On the white collar there, yes, indeed, super happy, of course, with the quality of the staff that we are having. The staff which is qualified in all directions. I mean, when I was here in the early 90s, we at that moment already had the best possible engineers. But in the 90s, it was more difficult to attract people which were as well savvy in or thinking of making a sales plan, a marketing plan, who knew a global accountancy, etc. So in the 90s, there was still a lot of expats, if you like, that were working in Russia in those functions as well. Those times are absolutely gone, and out of the 8,000 people that we employ, I'm actually the only one which is having a foreign passport. The remaining 7,999 people, that are all Russian nationals, and that's a very good thing. I mean, I consider myself as well, by the way, a Russian employee in that respect, and it makes sense from a taxation point of view, a personal taxation point of view as well. So this is engineering always very, very, very strong. A thing that we always have appreciated in our Russian employees or Russian engineers are the capability that they have as well to think out of the box. So if you say, look, we need to develop something or you need to do something, they just don't simply do it. They say, yes, okay, but if we do it slightly a different way, it might be even better. So I don't believe at all in the myth of top-down management. They follow the instructions of the boss. No, on the contrary, there's a lot of creativity that we have in the entire teams. A challenge that we have, and a challenge that is not uniquely a Russian challenge, but here as well, is of course when we talk now into the new wave of digitization, software, new kind of skill sets. Like many industrial companies, a lot of people are perfectly experts in the hardware side of the technology. When we're adding more and more layers of software on top of that, it's a different kind of language that you need to speak when you're bringing your value proposition to the end customer. By the way, also the end customer has the same challenge, because also they tend to be more CapEx oriented people, less OpEx oriented people. So there, as a company, and I know our peers are doing the same, we pay a lot of attention to retrain the people, to attract missing skills, to do even global, but also in Russia, certain acquisitions to make sure that we are speaking that digital language of the future as well. But all by all, I can only say very hardworking, very competent, very competitive people that we're employing in the organization.
Thanks, Johan. You know, our conversation is more strategic, and I wanted to have just a little technical question on the HR side. Is it a truism that the quality inevitably, 10, 15 years ago, as you were saying, the engineers and so on, fantastic. Have you seen in the market, in the company, and maybe a change of the dynamics, or, without the Soviet educational system in the background, have you seen any noticeable deterioration in the quality or not?
I know the legends about the collapse of the quality of the Russian educational system. It's a legend because the quality of the engineers which are being churned out from the Russian university, the Bauman University, MGU, you name it, has been top notch and stays top notch. The only thing that is changing, Danny, and that is again more a challenge that we have globally, is that the way of educating people has to change. I personally don't longer believe in a brick and mortar educational system whereby students are attending a lecture in an aula of a professor in the same, alma mater. I think also there the borders ought to disappear. I also believe that we need to provide the most modern tools of education, digital twins, virtual reality, or even holograms, you name it. And I believe that the university of the future ought not to be a university which is a national university. It has to be in partnership with the finest research and educational institutes worldwide. And glad to see that some of the more advanced Russian universities like IBS, to pick an example, is stepping up its transnational cooperation to provide that global educational experience to their students. Likewise, connecting students from other places in the world as well to the Russian side. So that I think is going to be very important. The way we are going to educate the workforce of the future has to change. It's not changing quick enough in my view, but otherwise a deterioration of the quality of the Russian educational system is just but a legend.
Okay, thanks, and I do not disagree, that's for sure. A couple of years ago, we were sitting in the forum room of the Kempinski Hotel, Johan, and you were speaking on one of our panels, and you made some very interesting and I think early remarks about the deglobalization of digital. I'm moving to the global picture now because this has ramifications for Russia, but yeah. Perhaps, and I've heard you since then, and I think you are absolutely spot on with what the trend is, one global digital platform, much less so now. Could you elaborate that for us, please?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I mean, Daniel, what we are seeing is a decoupling of the tech world between the West and the East. So the days whereby indeed a technology was developed in Silicon Valley, say IPRs owned in America, and from there commercialized all across the world, or the other way around, it was being done in Shenzhen in China, and from there it was sold all across the world. The globalization, personally, unfortunately, but that is the reality. It is a thing of the past, and the main reason why is, of course, geopolitics that we have seen there. Pick the example of Huawei, who I know rather well from my previous life when I was with Alcatel. Huawei technology is no longer allowed to be sold in Northern America, in European countries, for fear of the integrity of the telecommunication grid in those parts of the world. But the other way around, the largest market for many years for Alcatel Nokia globally was China. Today, Nokia is almost selling nothing anymore in the Chinese market because they are pushing the domestic vendor Huawei. So you are seeing a split in the supply chain. Especially, I must say, for critical infrastructure. I talk about electricity grids, I talk about telecommunication networks, I talk about those kind of things which, from a security point of view, are considered to be critical for the country, for the governments. Globalization of beverages or whatever, I see less of an issue in that respect. But this is what is happening. And then it has some implications as well for large companies. First of all, whereby indeed you see that quite some companies are now delivering or developing platforms, IPRs, source code owned in the West for the Western market, but a completely different platform than developed in Asia or in the East to be commercialized for the Asian markets. The big question that we have is where is Russia, Eurasia going to align? Yeah, obviously this region itself is pushing its own domestic localization agenda, the Made in Russia agenda, which is so important, with in certain cases quite some success, like pick the agricultural sector. I think that is a clear success story in that respect. Hardware, localization of hardware is a relatively easy thing, provided the business case makes sense, because people here, even at the government level, sometimes forget that the multinational is not going to localize any hardware manufacturing if there is no return on the investment. But we see that this is happening. And then the bigger topic, of course, is the software localization with stricter rules of the use of foreign-made software. And there my fear is that if at the end of the day, there will be not a possibility to have a local domestic software player for certain applications, be it a pure Russian one or a foreign company which is willing to pass intellectual property rights into the country itself, that Russia is going to source more and more those applications outside of from Asia, from either Chinese companies or maybe indeed from global companies like our company, which is having its own Chinese platform, which could then be commercialized in this part of the world. So what we're seeing, Daniel, I think is absolutely fascinating. It does not make economical sense at all. It is duplication of R&D, it is extra cost, it is driven because of a political agenda. But we should not be naive. I believe it's only going to accelerate for critical infrastructure, and a clever company, a forward-looking company, has to look at it as an opportunity, has to embrace it, and has to work out its own supply chain, decoupled supply chain strategy. So that is, I think, happening before our eyes.
Thank you. I've got a couple of closeout questions, Johan, and they're linked, and I'll tell you what they are. The first one is, we've been upbeat, and I think deservedly so, on the Russian market, but operationally, tactically, what are the headaches and obstacles that you face in operational business? I'm thinking of some things like, traditional ones would be the rule of law, property rights, local small-scale corruption, etc. How does that compare? And that would lead me in afterwards to the question about the image of Russia and where we are looking at that both internally in your company and other companies, and then the big picture. But the first question is, what are your operational headaches in running your 5 factories in Russia?
Look, Daniel, first of all, I consider myself very lucky. I am having a very easy job. Why is that? Because I'm working for a multinational, and a multinational has the luxury, if you like, if they make an investment, deep pockets, we can think a couple of years ahead. We have the possibility to employ an army of lawyers and financial people who make sure that we are following every single rule and regulation, so we can afford all that. I have the highest admiration for a small and medium Western company which is setting up its operation here, because the entry barriers, just from a cost point of view, are indeed very high. I don't talk about the culture, the language barriers that you face, but it is a problem for SMEs in that respect. For a large company like my own company, like competitors of us, you know what? We, the ones who are here, know that it is absolutely possible to grow your business. And we talked about the top line, which is good, but I want to point out as well that even more important is the EBITDA, is the bottom line. And if you're benchmarking operations in Russia compared to, say, India, which is legendary difficult to make a profit in, yes, you can maybe make higher total sales, but the bottom line in many cases is going to be far inferior towards the profits that you're making in this part of the world. There is bureaucracy, there is the regulatory hurdles, yes, of course. The legal system, I personally find the Russian legal framework a good one, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s. A lot of changes has been adopted, and in many cases the legal framework of Russia is very close to what we're used to in Europe. The Russian civil code is almost a copy of the Dutch civil code, which is a fact, so those concepts are well known. From a forum point of view, the Russian court system, I think, is operating very well, with maybe the exception if you would have to sue on a sensitive thing, one of the big companies a la the Gazproms of this world. I would at that moment still prefer to have a forum outside of the country. Let's be clear on that one as well. But this being said, the legal framework is much better than the reputation basically says it is. Corruption, first of all, like any Western company, we are a super law-abiding company. Zero compromises are made on that one. But the country has made also there a progress. If you like, you can perfectly develop your business in an ethical way. Maybe you have to walk away from certain deals or certain companies, but they're few. Otherwise, by and large, you can do that. As an observer, if I'm watching the corruption in this part of the world, maybe in the 90s it was partially in relationship foreign company to Russian partner. This is a thing of the past. If there is corruption, I'm more worried about state procurements in between Russian entities or in between Russian entities and the Russian state. I think there the government still has work to do. But also there, from a corruption point of view, you can perfectly do business here. And we are having similar challenges, by the way, in many other countries in the world. Let's also be clear on that one. So no, you can operate here. The macroeconomics of the country, you know perfectly yourself better than I do, are very sound. The country has challenges more in the microeconomy. We know that. But my biggest worry is not 2021 or 22. My biggest worry for Russia and the economy is the mid or the longer trend, which basically means that we are still having an economy which is dominated by large state companies, and an economy which is still very much carried on a economical model based on exportation of hydrocarbons, less than in the past, I agree. Diversification made some progress, I agree, but still to a very large extent, the wages of employees of the army of state officials are paid from the resources that they get from exporting oil and gas. And knowing the trends, knowing where Europe is going with the green economy, knowing the CO2 ambitions of China, unless Russia is going to reinvent its economical model rather quick, I think indeed that on the midterm we might have very serious challenges in the global economy, which will then obviously reflect on business itself.
Great. Johan, I won't put you on the spot. I'll just pay you a compliment, which I think I did before to you. I've always regarded myself as somebody who's ultra efficient, productive, and keep many balls in the air. And I've always admired my own time management. But just let me pay you the compliment. You're running your company, you're the chairman of the association, and I see you on LinkedIn traveling around and doing other things. So as one professional to another, I have to say, I take my hat off to you for your time management, and congratulations on that. And I trust you get a lot of time as well to put your feet up, relax and chill out.
Yes, it's also necessary once in a while, I agree. But it's fun working in this part of the world, Danny, as you know.
It is for sure. That's a very nice way to end off, and just to close off this conversation. Thanks very much, Johan. Thanks to our team who've done the organization for it, and we'll close there. And just to let all listeners know, this will be distributed in the near future, and we hope you enjoy it. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.